So I'm sure that like you've looked at non-surgical methods. So can you explain why non-surgical methods, like, I don't know, I'm sure you get asked this all the time, like a pill that would start regenerating new brain tissue or use the stem cells in your brain or something. Why doesn't that work?
Yeah. So there are a lot of approaches. Cellular reprogramming is a very popular one now. Previous to that, senolytics, getting rid of old cells. That's still very popular. Previous to that was, telomeres or, mitochondria. I mean,
Mm.
there's example after example of these things. But the problem is everything is accumulating damage. So you can't target just one thing and expect to stop aging. In fact, all it takes is one of those things to keep aging, even if you fixed all the rest. If you just have one of those things that are still going bad, you're still going to have a very limited lifespan, and that's showing in humans with mutations for like DNA repair genes, for example. That's all it takes, one thing to go bad, and then you have accelerated those. So even if everything else is working fine,
So it's not possible to like do it non-surgically, like have a pill that targets a certain area of the brain or something that targets a certain area of the brain and then kills it and then starts regenerating it somehow. That's just not.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's technically not possible. Again, the forms of damage that accumulate too are very complex. There's like many documented forms of this, what I call macromolecular damage, right? The damage that occurs to proteins. And these proteins no longer turn over and can't turn over, so you can't replace them. And so you would be looking at, combinations of dozens or 100 different drugs um, that would need to go in and fix each of those forms of damage without, hurting normal
Yeah.
proteins. These drugs,
At a specific location in the brain. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
That's just not
yeah,
possible in 2020,
right.
2021.
Yeah. So I mean, surgery is the only way, and you don't. There's very limited stem cells in the adult brain. It's actually
Mm.
controversial whether they still exist in adult humans and for how long. But even if they do, they're in very small, restricted locations of the brain. So
Really?
yeah. So the ones that everyone talks about all the time are like, oh, we have there's stem cells in the brain throughout our lives. Yeah, but they're really not that useful. They give rise to very specific types of nerve cells or neurons in very specific locations.
What are the locations? Because I've always heard like the reason that I think that is because, oh, you go for a run or you work out and then you have neurogenesis is the
Exactly.
prime word, and then everyone's like,
Right.
oh, your brain is regenerating, but
Yeah.
is it only regenerating where?
It's only in a part of the brain called the hippocampus. It's a
Hmm.
very important part of the brain. It's involved in forming new memories, but and it has other functions. But it's a very small part of the brain relative to like the neocortex. Neocortex is the outer folded tissue. When you imagine a human brain and you see all those folds, it looks like noodles. That's the neocortex, right? You don't see much of anything else. But in there are other parts of the brain. One of them is the hippocampus. Part of the hippocampus, like a third of it, is called the dentate gyrus, and a small layer of cells within that small part of the brain are neural stem cells.
No way.
At least in some mammals. Again, controversial whether they're still they're in humans, but yeah. So it's really not. I mean, it's exercise is healthy, right?
So that's just a pop science thing that went way too far.
It's way inflated. Absolutely, yeah.
Do
Uh,
those stem cells transfer to other areas of the brain, or they just can't extend?
Yeah, so those experiments have been done in mammals where they clearly exist in adults, and transplanting them to other parts of the brain. The problem is they still give rise to the cell types that they're supposed to for the hippocampus, the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus.
Mm,
They're not going to
mm.
give rise to neocortical
So
cells. So
even though it's stem cells, it's programmed for hippocampus.
exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
I
So it
see.
doesn't, they're not useful. So then you can talk about, well, we actually thought about this for a while. Well, what if we can like somehow get them to migrate to the neocortex and then become something else?
To
And
me, Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it just gets so difficult to do that compared to just putting in new neocortical cells there to start with, right? You still have to do surgeries to manipulate these. So why not just put the cells you want in the right place and let them do what they do?
To me, manipulating cells to become something else sounds a lot like Michael Levin's research. Have you looked into his stuff with the xenobots and the bioelectricity?
Yeah. I'm aware of it. That sounds very cool. And I think it's super important, like for other parts of the body. I don't see how it will apply to the brain. The reason I say that is other parts of the body can be replaced as whole organs, right? And that's sort of what he's showing is that you can use this bioelectricity to for morphogenesis, right? To shape organs and tissues as they're growing. So I think that's hugely could be hugely important. We haven't seen the results yet, but it could be hugely important for engineering or optimizing lab grown organs, which again are already being developed. Every organ in the body is in preclinical trials. So I'm optimistic about the body, but for the brain, again, yeah, you can't replace the whole brain, right? That's who you are. So you can only do it progressively. And you can only do it by, you can't even build the tissue and let it mature out of the brain and then put it in because it won't connect anymore, right? It has to be these very immature tissue that is still sending out processes and making connections to the rest of the brain to in order to work. So we have to actually rebuild the tissue in the brain itself. And so that gets a little trickier. And we can't do pieces that are too big. So we don't really need this bioelectricity. But it sounds like it could be very useful for the rest of the body. And I really look forward to hearing more about that.
I mean, I'm sure you've looked at all the approaches. So it seems like the focus then is building this extracellular matrix like outside of the brain and then implanting it. How do you go about growing that?
Yeah. And so it's the whole tissue, right? So tissues in our brain or any part of our body are composed of cells and then this extracellular matrix that you mentioned, which is
Mhm.
surrounds the cells. This extracellular matrix is hugely important. The cells that are there are completely dependent on that extracellular matrix for their function and their survival and communicating with other cells. So it's really important.